Hey folks, welcome aboard. Tonight we're diving into the mysterious world of the Baltic Sea, ghost ships, legends, and stories that'll give you chills but also maybe a laugh or two. If you enjoy spooky tales mixed with history and a cozy storytelling vibe, you're in the right place. Before we set sail, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the ship afloat and makes sure you don't miss the next chapter of our ghostly journey. Alright, let's begin. Picture this. The Baltic Sea at night. The waves don't crash here like wild ocean waves. Nope. They just lap, gently, like someone tapping their fingers on the table. The wind moves too, whispering in soft bursts, like it's sharing secrets you're not quite supposed to hear. Above it all? Stars. Millions of them. Cold, white sparks scattered across a sky so dark it almost feels endless. Every now and then a cloud drifts by, dragging mist along with it, like a slow ghost on vacation. It's calm. It's beautiful. But it's also a little creepy, right? Like something could rise up from that fog at any second. And here's the fun part. Sometimes, people swear something does rise up. We're talking ghost ships. Not the cheesy Halloween decoration kind. Not the ride you take at a carnival with fake skeletons shaking on wires. I mean real vessels, or at least they look real. Ships that appear out of the fog, sailing steady, lights on deck glowing faintly, and then vanish. No trace. No splash. Just gone. Sailors through the centuries have told stories of ships that aren't quite there. Some say they're warnings. Others say they're trapped souls of crews who never made it home. And some say it's just the sea playing tricks with your eyes. You know, like when you think you see your phone on the table, but it's actually under the couch. But still, it makes you wonder. Now, the Baltic Sea, that's the perfect place for this kind of legend. First off, the weather. If the North Atlantic is like an angry drunk at the bar, the Baltic is more like the quiet guy in the corner, but don't let that fool you. 1 second, it's calm and still, glassy like a mirror. The next second, the mist rolls in thick, swallowing the horizon. And if a storm shows up? Good luck. The waves might not be as massive as the open ocean, but the sudden squalls here have sunk more ships than you'd want to count. Then there's the history. The Baltic has been busy for centuries. Vikings rode here. Medieval merchants sailed their cogs and hulks through these waters. Pirates hunted in these channels. And later, war fleets clashed here, cannon smoke drifting across the waves. Every era left wrecks on the seabed, like breadcrumbs for divers to find. Thousands of them. Some still with their masts poking out like the sea just hasn't finished eating. And you know what happens when you've got that much history mixed with foggy nights? Source. Lots of stories. Imagine you're a sailor in the 1700s. No GPS. No radar. Just stars and maybe a rusty compass. You're tired, cold, and the only thing keeping you awake is bad coffee and worse tobacco. Suddenly, through the mist, you spot sails. A dark silhouette moving across the water, silent, eerie. You blink. You rub your eyes. The ship's still there. And then, poof, gone. What do you tell your mates? Hey guys, I just saw a phantom ship. They'll laugh at you, sure. But later, when they're alone on watch and they see a shadow in the fog too, they won't laugh so much. The Baltic has given birth to legends like that over and over. Some ships became myths themselves. Others? Real events blurred into mystery. You'll hear about crews disappearing. About wrecks showing up decades later with no sign of life on board. About signals from ships that should have been sunk long ago. And yeah, some of these can be explained. Optical illusions are a big one. There's this thing called Fata Morgana. Sounds like a cool magician's name, right? But it's actually a mirage caused by layers of warm and cold air bending light. Basically, the sea can trick you into seeing ships floating in the air, or bigger and closer than they really are. Science says it's normal. Sailors say it's spooky. Both can be true. But not every tale has an easy answer. Some remain unsolved. And that's what makes the sea so fascinating. The Baltic doesn't scream danger the way the Atlantic or the Pacific does. It whispers. It teases. It lures you into comfort and then drops a shadow across your path. And because humans are, well, humans, we tell stories about those shadows. We give them names. We turn them into legends. And you know what? Those legends survive. Even now, in the age of satellites and sonar, stories of ghost ships still pop up. A fisherman spots lights where no ship should be. A passenger on a ferry swears they saw a sailing vessel drifting silently past, sails full though no wind was blowing. Coast guards get calls about phantom signals. Technology hasn't killed the ghost ship. If anything, it's made the idea weirder, because how do you explain a radar ping from a ship that isn't there? So yeah, ghost ships in the Baltic aren't just an old tale. They're part of the sea's personality. Think of the Baltic as that friend who's usually calm, polite, and predictable, but every so often, they drop a sentence that makes you stop and go, "Wait, what did you just say?" That's the sea. Calm, steady, but always carrying a secret under the surface. And if you stick with me, we're going to dig into those secrets. Yeah, those guys. Long hair, long boats, long axes. The Vikings were the original Uber drivers of the Baltic, except instead of picking you up and dropping you off, they usually showed up, raided your village, and sailed away with your stuff. Their ships were perfect for these waters. Long, narrow, shallow draft. They could cut across open sea and then slide right into rivers like they owned the place. And in a way, they kinda did. But the Vikings weren't just smashing and grabbing. They also traded. Amber for honey, Baltic gold, basically. They carried it down to the Mediterranean, swapped it for silver and silk, and then came back up, pockets jingling. The Baltic was their home base, their launch pad, their freeway to adventure. Then came the Hanseatic League. If the Vikings were the wild rock band of the sea, the Hanseatic League was the corporate office that showed up after. Picture this, cities like Lübeck, Gdansk, Riga, Tallinn, all teaming up into a medieval trade cartel. They dominated the Baltic, running fleets of cogs loaded with grain, timber, tar, fish. You name it. These guys didn't just sail, they organized. Their ships covered the sea like a web. Ports lit up with warehouses, bells rang for markets, and contracts were signed over tankards of beer. But of course, where there's trade, there's danger. Pirates prowled, storms struck, and ships sank. And every time a crew went missing, guess what? Another ghost story was born. After that, the Swedish Empire had its golden run. The 1600s were basically Sweden's main character era. They called the Baltic our lake. Bold, right? Their warships ruled the water, sails full, cannons lined up, ready to blast. And with power came pride, and with pride came, well, the occasional sinking. You've probably heard of the warship Vasa. Spoiler, it didn't last long. It tipped over and sank on its first voyage, like a giant expensive toddler face-planting in the kiddie pool. Now it's a museum piece, a reminder that even kings can't argue with the sea. Still, Sweden kept trading, fighting, and writing its name into Baltic history. Then Russia entered the chat. Peter the Great looked at the Baltic and thought, I want a piece of that. So he built St. Petersburg, right on the marshy edge of the sea, and turned it into a shiny new window to Europe. Suddenly, Russian ports were buzzing. Ships loaded with hemp, tar, and timber sailed west, and in return came fancy European goods. And of course, with more ships came more chances for something to go wrong, and more eerie sightings when they did. So yeah, the Baltic has always been crowded. Vikings, merchants, empires, pirates. Picture it like a highway, but instead of cars honking, it's sails creaking, ropes snapping, gulls screaming overhead. With that much traffic, no wonder stories piled up. Now, let's talk about the sailors. Life at sea wasn't exactly Netflix and chill. You had long days of rowing, hauling ropes, scrubbing decks, staring at the horizon until your eyes went numb. No Wi-Fi, no podcasts, no scrolling TikTok. Just waves. Endless waves. So how did they pass the time? They told stories. Big, wild, spooky, ridiculous stories. And like all good stories, they grew in the telling. A sailor sees a shadow one night. By morning, it's a full phantom ship with glowing lanterns and a headless captain at the helm. By the next port, it's a cursed vessel with a crew of skeletons playing dice below deck. Stories were survival. They broke the boredom, bonded the crew, and gave shape to the weird things the sea does. And the Baltic, with its fog and storms, gave sailors plenty of material. Some of the earliest written mentions of strange ships in the Baltic come from logs and chronicles. Old scribes wrote in simple notes, like, "Night, heavy fog. Lights seen upon water. No vessel upon inspection." Translation? We saw something, we freaked out, and then we had no clue what it was. Folklore picked it up from there. In the 13th century, there were whispers of white ships seen near the Gulf of Finland. In the 14th century, Hanseatic sailors talked about silent cogs drifting past at night, vanishing by dawn. By the 16th century, some Swedish logs described phantom sails that appeared before storms, like a bad omen. These weren't polished ghost stories yet. More like scribbled warnings. Notes passed down the line. Hey, if you see a ship that looks too quiet, maybe just turn around. Of course, once the tales left the ship and hit the tavern, they blew up. Picture sailors hunched over mugs of ale in a smoky inn, retelling what they saw. Each one adds a little spice. A ghostly captain. A crew frozen in time. A lantern swinging in the fog, always just out of reach. The stories grew legs, walked ashore, and became folklore. And people on land? They ate it up. Because let's be real, what's more fun than a spooky sea tale when you're safe by the fire? So when we talk about ghost ships in the Baltic, we're not just talking about modern sightings. We're tapping into a deep well of stories that go back centuries. From Viking whispers about phantom longships, to Hanseatic notes in shipping logs, to Swedish warnings of sails before a storm, it's all part of the same current. And here's the cool thing. Those stories don't stay still. They drift just like ships. One captain's log becomes another sailor's tavern tale. That tavern tale becomes a legend passed down through families. And centuries later, someone swears they saw the same thing on a misty night near Gotland. The line between history and myth blurs, and suddenly you don't know if you're reading a logbook or listening to a ghost story. So, what have we got so far? A sea that's been busy for centuries. Sailors with too much time and too many stories. And early accounts that hint at ships that may or may not be real. That's the foundation. The stage. The previously on, for our series. Because from here, things only get weirder. Imagine it. You're on deck, dawn breaking, the sea calm. Suddenly, another ship slides into view, sails full but silent, no crew in sight. You wave. Nothing. You call out. No reply. You blink, and it's gone. That feeling? That mix of awe and dread? That's what Baltic sailors have carried with them for 1,000 years. And that's the sea of stories we're sailing into. And hey, if a ghost ship does pull up alongside us, maybe they'll at least share some snacks. You've probably heard of the Flying Dutchman. Yeah, the big one. The celebrity ghost ship. It's got cameos in operas, paintings, and even a certain pirate movie franchise. According to legend, it's cursed to sail forever, never making port, always glowing on the horizon like a neon sign you can't quite reach. Spotting it was supposed to mean bad luck, maybe even death. Cheerful stuff. And then there's the Mary Celeste. Different vibe. Not so much a ghostly vision as a real ship with a spooky twist. In 1872, it was found adrift in the Atlantic with everything on board, cargo, supplies, even the crew's belongings, except the crew themselves. Gone. No blood, no fight, no clue. Just empty. Creepy in a whole different way. So yeah, the world's seas have their fair share of ghost ship icons. But here's the thing, the Baltic doesn't like to be left out. While the Flying Dutchman hogged the spotlight in the south, the north brewed its own set of phantom stories. Ships that weren't supposed to be there. Shadows in the mist. Lanterns swinging with no hands to hold them. And unlike the Mary Celeste, these weren't ships anyone could board and investigate. Nope. These were more like visions. They showed up, scared the pants off everyone, and then dissolved back into the fog. The earliest written Baltic phantom sightings we know about go back to the 1500s and 1600s. Imagine the scene, a wooden deck, creaky ropes, and sailors squinting into the night. Someone sees sails in the distance. The crew gathers, whispers. Who's that? The ship gets closer, but too quiet, too still. And then? Nothing. Vanished. One story from the 16th century talks about a white ship near the Gulf of Finland. It was said to glow faintly, sliding through the mist without a sound. Sailors swore it appeared right before storms, like a warning banner flapping in the dark. Some said it carried drowned souls. Others claimed it was an omen. If you saw it, your ship might be next. In the 17th century, Hanseatic traders had their own encounters. Logs mention phantom cogs drifting across moonlit waters. Cogs were the workhorse ships of the time, fat-bellied, sturdy, with a single mast. Spotting one wasn't unusual, except when no crew was visible, no sound of sails, and then the whole thing melted back into fog. Sailors didn't shrug that off. They filed it under "do not want." Swedish records from the same era mention phantom sails spotted near Gotland, always at dusk or dawn when the light played tricks. The reports say these ghostly ships often came before sudden squalls. You see canvas glowing in the dim light, you brace for rough weather. Simple cause and effect? Maybe. But sailors didn't call it science. They called it a bad sign. Now, here's the fun part. Fear of storms played a huge role in this. Think about it. Back then, storms were no joke. Today we've got weather apps and satellites. Back then, you had the sky. If the clouds looked angry, you prayed. The Baltic might look calm, but it can whip up fierce gales that smash ships like toys. Hundreds of wrecks from that time still sit on the seabed, preserved in the cold water like museum exhibits nobody asked for. So when sailors saw strange shapes or lights on the horizon, their brains did the math. Step 1, we're seeing something weird. Step 2, a storm's coming. Step 3, oh no, that thing is cursed. Fear makes great fertilizer for legends. And storms gave plenty of fear. Picture this. You're a sailor in the 1600s. You've been at sea for weeks, stomach full of salted fish, head buzzing from lack of sleep. You're on watch, the fog rolls in thick, and suddenly you see a set of sails. The ship is too close, but you hear nothing. No crew shouting, no oars splashing, no anchor dropping. Just silence. Your heart thumps. You call the others. They see it too. Then lightning flashes, and the ship's gone. What do? You tell the story. You tell it again at the tavern. You tell it to your grandkids. And by the third retelling, that ship isn't just a shadow, it's the white phantom of the Baltic, omen of doom. These tales weren't just for scaring sailors. They spread ashore to fishermen whispered them while patching nets. Merchants repeated them in marketplaces. Even nobles heard them, usually after too much wine at banquets. Ghost ships became part of the sea's reputation. Not just storms to fear, but the shadows before the storms. And it makes sense. Humans love patterns. If something spooky shows up before a disaster, we connect the dots. Even if the something spooky was just a mirage, or mist bending the light, or too much bad rum. The Flying Dutchman might have been the poster child of ghost ships, but the Baltic had its own cousins. Less famous, sure. But for the people who lived and died on those waters, they were just as real. You didn't need a global legend when you had your own. Ships glowing white before a storm. Silent cogs gliding into nothing. Phantom sails fluttering on the horizon. Each one tied to the fear that the sea could swallow you whole. And honestly, the recipe still works. Even now, with GPS and engines and comfy ferry seats, people still report strange lights and shapes out here. Which makes you wonder, are ghost ships just old sailor tales? Or is the Baltic still hiding a few cousins of the Dutchman, drifting quietly in the mist? If they are, I hope they've upgraded their sails by now. Maybe slapped on a motor. Being a ghost's tough work. The white ship of the Gulf of Finland. It's not just some vague rumor. This is the legend sailors talked about again and again. A glowing ship, pale as bone, sliding across the water just before a storm breaks loose. Some people called it a warning. Others called it cursed. Either way, nobody ignored it. So, let's set the scene. The Gulf of Finland is that stretch of sea between Finland, Estonia, and Russia. Narrow, full of fog, storms, and ice in winter. Perfect place for a ghost ship to hang out. According to legend, the white ship appears on nights when the air is heavy, when the sea is just a little too calm, like it's holding its breath. Out of the mist comes this vessel, sails glowing white, hull gleaming like moonlight, silent as a shadow. No crew on deck, no splash of oars, nothing. Just a pale light moving steady across the dark water. And the storm. Waves thrash, winds howl, and the sea takes its payment. Ships wreck. Fishermen vanish. The white ship was always blamed for showing up first, like some spooky weather forecast nobody asked for. Now, let's talk witnesses. This isn't just my cousin's uncle's friend once saw it. The white ship has been reported by actual working folks. Fishermen, for one. Old logs and folklore mention men hauling nets at night and suddenly freezing as a pale glow slid across the water. One fisherman swore the ship moved without sound, even though the sea was calm enough you should have heard every creak of wood. He said the sails looked like ice lit from inside. He packed up and went home early, which honestly seems like the right move. Then there were lighthouse keepers. These were not people who got spooked easy. Their whole job was sitting in a tower, staring at the sea for hours. Some of them wrote about seeing a glowing outline of a ship drifting by, only for a storm to hit the coast the next morning. One keeper even noted the glow was so bright he could see it reflected on the waves. He logged it, matter of fact, like, phantom ship again. Storm tomorrow. Imagine being so used to ghost ships that you just write it down like checking the weather. Even merchant crews reported it. A Swedish logbook from the 18th century mentions a white phantom that appeared off the bow at dusk. The captain noted the ship gave off no sound, no signal, and when they tried to approach, it faded into the mist. That night, they fought a gale so strong half the sails tore. Different people, different centuries, same story, glowing white ship, then storm. So what is it? Well, there are a few theories. Let's break them down. Theory 1. Mirages. The sea can play tricks with light. Remember the Fata Morgana we talked about before? That weird mirage where layers of warm and cold air bend light and make ships look like they're floating, glowing, or stretched tall like skyscrapers. The Gulf of Finland has the right conditions for that. Cold water, warm air layers, plenty of fog. So maybe the white ship was just an ordinary vessel bent and stretched by the atmosphere until it looked spooky. Basically, ghost ship sponsored by physics. Theory 2, bioluminescence. The sea has its own natural night lights. Tiny plankton that glow when stirred up, jellyfish that flash, even schools of fish that sparkle under the surface. If enough of them gathered near a ship's wake or along the ice, they could make it look like something glowing was moving through the water. Sailors, half asleep, would see it and freak out. Boom, white ship sighting. Theory 3, ice reflections. The Gulf of Finland is icy for a good chunk of the year. Ice sheets, chunks, and floating floes catch the moonlight and shimmer. Imagine a wall of ice shaped vaguely like sails, glowing white in the dark. Add mist, tired eyes, and a little imagination, and suddenly you've got yourself a ghostly vessel cruising by. Nature's special effects at work. Of course, those are the science-why explanations. And maybe they're right. But you know how stories work. Once enough people swear they've seen the same thing, it's not just an ice floe anymore. It's the white ship. It's a legend. And legends stick around for a reason. For sailors, the white ship wasn't just a scary bedtime tale. It was a warning. You see the glow? You get ready. Tie down the rigging, check the pumps, pray a little harder. Even if it was just a mirage, it was useful. A sign the air and sea were about to go bad. For fishermen, it was respect. They knew the Gulf could turn deadly fast. Spotting the white ship was like the sea saying, "Not tonight, friend. Go home." And most of them listened. For lighthouse keepers, it was proof that the sea had secrets. They spent their lives staring at the water, and even they couldn't explain everything they saw. The legend grew because it mixed two things humans love: mystery and danger. A glowing ghost ship and a storm that could sink you. It tied the natural fear of weather to something you could picture, something you could tell stories about. Instead of saying, "Storms come out of nowhere," you say, "The white ship showed up." It gave the chaos a face. And here's the kicker, people still talk about it. Even in the 20th century, Fishermen around the Gulf whispered about lights on the water before bad weather. Some said they saw shapes in the mist, too ship-like to be chance. Technology hasn't erased the white ship. If anything, it's made the mystery sharper because now we can track ships with radar and satellites, and sometimes, the glowing shapes don't match anything real. So maybe it's a mirage. Maybe it's glowing plankton. Maybe it's just tired eyes staring too long at the waves. Or maybe, just maybe, the white ship is still out there, sliding across the Gulf of Finland, keeping its schedule. Appearing before storms, glowing pale, vanishing into mist. By the time the world slid into World War II, the Baltic Sea wasn't just a busy trade route anymore. It was a battlefield. The water turned into a chessboard. Convoys ran supplies. U-boats prowled under the surface. Mines floated just beneath the waves, waiting for unlucky hulls. Battleships and destroyers darted in and out of harbors. Every square mile of the Baltic was watched, mapped, and patrolled. On paper, it was all strategy. In practice? Chaos. Smoke, storms, submarines, explosions, and in the middle of all that, the legends didn't stop. They just upgraded. Instead of ghostly cogs or phantom white sails, sailors started reporting something new, phantom convoys. Here's how it worked. Radar was the new big thing back then. For the first time, you could see ships in the dark or through fog. Convoys depended on it. Naval bases trusted it. Submarines feared it. Radar was the all-seeing eye. Except sometimes, it saw things that weren't there. Reports from the 1940s mention what sailors called ghost blips. Radar screens would suddenly light up with a convoy, multiple ships, steady formation, moving just like the real thing. Alarms would sound. Crews would scramble to battle stations. Commanders would prepare for contact. And then, nothing. No ships appeared on the horizon. No engines. No lights. The radar showed a full convoy cruising by, but the ocean was empty. Just waves. This didn't happen once or twice. It popped up in several accounts. Some German logs mentioned chasing phantom signals across the Gulf of Bothnia. Soviet patrol boats reported convoys that dissolved into static. Even neutral observers in Sweden noted strange blips that vanished before anyone could confirm them. Theories flew around. Malfunction? Enemy jamming? Or something else? Something less easy to explain? But radar wasn't the only place the ghost showed up. Some sailors swore they heard phantom ships. Imagine being on a quiet watch, night sky heavy, sea calm, and then you hear it. The low rumble of engines. Propellers churning water. The sound of a convoy rolling past in the dark. You hold your breath, waiting for shapes to appear. Minutes pass. The sound fades. And the sea stays empty. One Soviet sailor wrote later that he heard the steady march of engines all night long, as if a convoy passed our bow in darkness. But when dawn came, the horizon was clear. Nothing. Others claimed they saw the outlines of warships through fog. Big destroyers, gray and sharp, sailing fast. Crews braced for impact, weapons ready. Then the fog lifted, and there was only water. Now, part of this can be chalked up to stress. War at sea wasn't exactly a spa retreat. Sailors were exhausted, anxious, fueled by bad rations and adrenaline. You're jumpy, your radar's buzzing, and every wave looks like an enemy submarine. Your brain fills in gaps. But still, the number of reports, from different sides, different places, makes you wonder. Could they all be wrong? The most famous phantom story from the Baltic comes from 1942. A German coastal station tracked what looked like a massive convoy heading west. The radar showed dozens of ships. Command scrambled U-boats to intercept. Hours passed. The subs reported nothing. Planes searched the sea lanes. Nothing. The blips vanished as suddenly as they appeared. Later, Soviet reports described a nearly identical event, but from the opposite side. Their radar picked up convoys that moved like shadows across the Gulf of Finland, never leaving a wake. Crews joked bitterly that even the dead were running supplies. And then there were the sailors who swore it wasn't just shadows. One anecdote tells of a Finnish crew near Hanko who claimed they saw a whole line of warships sliding silently across the horizon at twilight. No sound, no lights, just dark shapes against a red sky. They thought it was German reinforcements. They braced for attack. But the shapes faded like smoke. Hours later, a storm broke. Some muttered it wasn't ships at all, but omens. Another tale from a Soviet destroyer crew says they chased the sound of engines for an entire night. Every man on deck swore they heard them. But dawn revealed only mist. The captain wrote in his log, "We followed ghosts." So what's going on here? Well, again, a few theories. Theory 1. Radar glitches. Radar in the 1940s wasn't perfect. Temperature layers, atmospheric distortion, even flocks of birds could create false returns. A screen full of dots might look like a convoy when it was just static. Basically, the machines were haunted by science, not spirits. Theory 2. Acoustic illusions. Sound carries strangely over water. Engines from miles away can echo and bounce, sounding close when they're far. Fog and wind bend sound too. So sailors might have been hearing real convoys, just nowhere near where they thought. Theory 3. Stress and fear. War exhausts people. Sleep-deprived sailors staring at screens or fog too long can start to imagine patterns. A weird echo or flicker becomes a whole fleet in your head. Phantom convoys as products of tired minds. Theory 4. The fun one, ghosts. The Baltic was packed with wrecks and lost crews. Thousands of men went down in its cold water. So some sailors believed the phantom convoys were the dead, still running their eternal patrols. Warships stuck forever in formation, echoes of battles replaying under the surface. Legends like these stuck because they made sense emotionally. If you're in the middle of war, surrounded by death, and you see something strange, your mind leaps to meaning. A ghost blip isn't just a glitch, it's a warning. A phantom convoy isn't just a mirage, it's the past bleeding into the present. And honestly, doesn't that sound more interesting than oops, radar error? The phantom convoys added another layer of fear to a sea already full of it. Mines, U-boats, storms, and now, the chance your radar was chasing ghosts. Imagine being a young sailor, already terrified, and then your instruments tell you a fleet is coming when the horizon is empty. No wonder people whispered. If the Baltic Sea was a stage, then 1944 was one of its darkest acts. The war was burning across Europe, and the Baltic was thick with mines, submarines, and desperate ships trying to make it through alive. Among those ships was the SS Hansa, a German passenger liner pressed into wartime service. The Hansa wasn't built for battle. She was elegant, meant to ferry civilians, soldiers, supplies. By the winter of '44, she was running routes across the Baltic. Cold, gray water. Ice on the decks. Nerves stretched thin. On the morning of March 6, 1944, the SS Hansa set out across the Gulf of Finland. Passengers bundled in coats. Crew doing their usual checks. But under the waves, a Soviet submarine lurked. At 5:57 a.m., the sub fired. A torpedo struck the Hansa's side. The ship shuddered, steel tearing like paper. Panic rolled across the decks. Within minutes, the Hansa was gone, swallowed by the Baltic. Of the 86 people on board, only 2 survived. Everyone else went down with the ship into that freezing black water. Here's where the story starts to drift into ghost territory. Those 2 survivors, both crewmen, swore that long after the ship disappeared beneath the waves, they still heard it. Not the noise of the ocean, not their own voices, but the cries of their fellow passengers echoing across the water. The sound of panic, desperate voices calling for help, even though everyone else was already gone. One of them said later, "The ship was silent, but the sea was not. The voices followed us for hours." Creepy? Yeah. But the Baltic has a way of keeping things unsettled. The wreck of the SS Hansa still lies on the seabed today. Cold, twisted steel in the darkness. Divers have visited it. And like most Baltic wrecks, it's not just a dive site, it's a grave. But the Hansa is different. Divers tell stories. Not the usual "it's eerie down there" stuff. No, they describe shadows moving inside. Imagine you're floating with your torchlight cutting through the murk. Steel walls, broken staircases, collapsed cabins. Then you see it, A shape slipping past like someone walking through the corridors? You swing your light. Nothing. Just empty rooms. One diver claimed he saw what looked like a woman in a long black coat drifting along the corridor. Not swimming, not floating, just moving like she was still walking the ship. The Lady in Black, they called her. Another diver described hearing a faint echo, almost like voices carrying through metal halls. He surfaced shaken, insisting he wasn't the only one who heard it. Now, if one person says that, fine, maybe nerves. But several divers have repeated similar experiences. Always a shadow. Always a sense that someone is still inside the Hansa, wandering. So who is the Lady in Black? Some say she's one of the passengers who went down. Maybe a mother searching for her child, maybe just a woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others think she's not a single person at all, but the spirit of the ship itself, manifesting as a figure. A way for the wreck to say, I'm still here. And honestly, if you've got to haunt something, a wrecked German liner at the bottom of the Baltic has the right amount of drama. Of course, not everyone buys the ghost angle. There are more grounded explanations. First, sound tricks. Water carries sound in weird ways. Waves crash, ice shifts, a nearby boat's propeller hums, all that can echo through the hull of a wreck, making it feel like voices. Add the metal corridors of a sunken liner, and you've basically got a giant underwater speaker system for your imagination. Second, shadows. Underwater light is tricky. Torches cut small beams, and particles in the water distort shapes. A cloud of silt, a school of fish, even your own bubbles can look like a figure moving. When you're deep, cold, and short on oxygen, your brain will happily turn shadows into the Lady in Black. Third, psychology. Divers already know wrecks can feel overwhelming. You're in a place where hundreds of people died. It's dark, silent, heavy. Your mind carries that weight. Fear plus suggestion plus imagination equals ghosts. Basically, your brain is the best special effects team ever. Still, the Hansa's legend sticks because it mixes tragedy and mystery. A ship lost in seconds. Survivors haunted by voices. Divers convinced they aren't alone in the wreck. It's the kind of story that keeps getting retold because it fits so perfectly with the Baltic's atmosphere. Cold water. Endless mist. History layered on top of history. And besides, who doesn't love a classic, Lady in Black, ghost tale? She's practically part of the job description for haunted places. Castles have them. Old houses have them. Why not sunken ships? So, when people talk about the Hansa now, they don't just talk about a German liner sunk in 1944. They talk about the woman who still walks its corridors, unseen but not unnoticed. Some divers swear they'll never go back after what they experienced. Others keep diving, half hoping to spot her again, half dreading it. The wreck has become both a dive site and a story site, history and legend welded together under layers of rust. And whether the Lady in Black is real or not almost doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone who hears the story remembers the people lost that day. The ghost becomes a way to keep memory alive. If I ever meet her, I just hope she's polite. Maybe offers directions. Hey ma'am, where's the exit hatch? The Hansa is more than just a wreck. It's a reminder of war, loss, and the things we carry in our heads when we step into dark places. The Lady in Black might be a trick of light, or she might still be down there, pacing the ship, waiting for the next diver to drift past. Either way, the Baltic keeps her secret. Every sea has its treasure story, right? Sunken gold, cursed jewels, mysterious cargo. The Baltic is no different. And one of its most famous treasure tales is tied to a ship called the Vrouw Maria. Now, with a name like Vrouw Maria, you might expect a gentle little vessel, maybe carrying tulips or cheese wheels. Nope. This Dutch merchant ship was hauling something far fancier. In 1771, the Vrouw Maria set sail loaded with goods meant for none other than Catherine the Great of Russia. We're talking rare paintings, luxury items, artwork collected across Europe. Basically, an art lover's Amazon Prime delivery. But the Baltic doesn't care if you're hauling bread or Rembrandts. A storm rolled in near the Finnish archipelago, waves smashing hard. Despite the crew's best efforts, the Vrouw Maria went down. Just like that. Cargo, treasure, everything gone to the bottom. News spread fast. Catherine the Great was furious. Think about it. She'd ordered a ship full of luxury goods, and instead of shiny new artwork, she got excuses. Russia tried to recover the cargo, but 18th century tech wasn't exactly great for deep-sea salvage. Divers in heavy suits couldn't get down that far, and the wreck slipped into legend. Soon, whispers began. Locals claimed the wreck wasn't just full of treasure, it was guarded. Fishermen muttered about strange lights beneath the waves. Some swore they saw figures standing on the water near the wreck site, warning boats to keep their distance. One story says a fisherman heard voices calling his name while he hauled nets nearby. He dropped everything and rowed for shore, convinced the spirits of drowned sailors were chasing him. Another tale described a glowing figure, almost like a woman in robes, floating above the waves on foggy nights. Was it Maria herself? Or one of Catherine's courtiers, angry their portrait was rotting in salt water? No one knew. But the idea stuck. The Vrouw Maria wasn't just a wreck, it was a haunted vault. For more than 200 years, people speculated. Where exactly was the ship? Was the cargo still intact? Was it really guarded by ghosts? Finally, in 1999, a Finnish research team got answers. Using sonar and modern diving gear, they located the wreck near Novo, Finland. And here's the kicker. The Vrouw Maria was in surprisingly good shape. The Baltic's cold, low-oxygen water works like a freezer. Wood, ropes, even some cargo survived. It was like the ship had just gone down for a nap. Divers were thrilled, but also spooked. The first dives brought eerie reports. Some divers described feeling watched the whole time they were down there. Now, anyone who's ever been underwater knows you can feel alone in a wreck. It's dark, cramped, claustrophobic. But these divers swore it wasn't just nerves. They felt a presence. One diver claimed he saw a figure standing inside a cabin, too tall, too clear to be a trick of light. He said it looked like a sailor in old clothes, staring straight at him before melting into the shadows. Another diver told of hearing muffled knocks on the hull, even though no one else was nearby. Just steady thuds, like someone trapped inside. He surfaced shaken, insisting it couldn't have been natural. Even stranger, a few divers reported odd malfunctions with equipment near the wreck. Lights flickering, cameras glitching, compasses spinning. Now, skeptics will say saltwater messes with gear all the time. But when it happens right after you think you saw a ghost sailor, yeah, it sticks in your head. So, do the guardians of the Vrouw Maria exist? Or are we just good at spooking ourselves? Option 1. Classic psychology. You know you're diving into a ship that carried treasure for an empress. You've heard the ghost rumors. You're 60 feet under cold water, your oxygen's tight, and your brain's going, what was that shadow? Fear plus history equals ghost. Option 2. Light tricks. In dark water, torchlight hits silt, wood, fish, all of it can look like human shapes. Shadows stretch and bend. What looks like a tall sailor could just be your dive buddy's fin. Option 3. The fun version. The Vrouw Maria is guarded. Sailors who died at sea, spirits tied to Catherine's lost treasure, or maybe just the sea itself keeping what it claimed. After all, if you had priceless artwork tucked away, wouldn't you hire ghost security? Free 24/7 service. The rediscovery of the Vrouw Maria sparked debate. Should we salvage the art? Recover Catherine's treasure? Or leave it alone, as both history and grave? So far, the ship rests where it sank. Some argue it's too fragile to move. Others say it's better as a protected site, left undisturbed. But the ghost stories? They keep divers curious, and tourists fascinated. The legend of the Vrouw Maria blends everything: treasure, history, mystery, and a dash of the supernatural. It's like the Baltic Sea's own cocktail, half museum, half ghost story. And whether you believe the guardians are real or not, the wreck has already achieved immortality. Every time someone tells the story, Catherine's lost cargo sails again, and the lady in the waves keeps her post. Honestly, if I were a ghost stuck guarding art for 250 years, I'd be bored out of my mind. Imagine explaining that to another ghost. Yeah, what do you haunt? Oh, a castle dungeon, lots of screams. I haunt paintings in boxes. The Vrouw Maria is more than treasure underwater. It's a reminder that history doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes it hums, whispers, and flickers like a shadow at the edge of your torchlight. Every sea has its ghosts. But the Baltic? It has wraiths. Now, don't picture some Hollywood monster with glowing eyes and claws. In Baltic lore, a wraith was the spirit of a drowned sailor, someone who went overboard and never came home. Instead of finding peace, they lingered in the mist, clinging to ships that sailed by. Sometimes to warn, sometimes to doom. Always to remind the living that the sea never really gives back what it takes. And in a place like the Baltic, where storms could flip a boat in minutes, wraith stories spread like wildfire. Sailors believed the drowned returned to walk the decks at night, cold and dripping, faces pale as the moon. You might hear their boots on the planks, or feel a hand brush your shoulder when nobody was there. Creepy? Yeah. But for sailors, it was also just another shift at sea. The myths changed depending on where you asked. Let's do a little tour. In Finland, they spoke of Marimiehen Haamu, the ghost sailor. He was said to rise out of the fog, dripping seawater, eyes blank. If he stood silently at the bow of your ship, it meant safe passage, like he was guiding you home. But if he started pacing the deck, restless and angry, that was bad news. Storm incoming. Best start praying or paddling. In Estonia, the stories were darker. They told of Meriveimud, sea spirits who dragged living sailors into the water. According to the tales, if you saw a face in the waves that looked familiar, maybe even like your dead shipmate, you should never lean over the side. That was the wraith calling you down. Ignore it, or join the crew of the drowned. Not exactly the motivational pep talk you want before a night shift. In Sweden, they had the Stjora, sort of a seakeeper spirit. Not always evil, not always kind. Some sailors swore she appeared as a pale woman on deck, warning of reefs ahead. Others said she lured men overboard with her song. Basically, half guardian angel, half troublemaker. Like that one coworker who covers your shift but also steals your lunch. And in Latvia, there were stories of jurisgari, sea ghosts who punished greed. If sailors kept more fish than they needed, or if a captain treated his crew harshly, the jurisgari would rise. Nets would tear, winds would die, ropes would snap. Some captains claimed to see whole phantom crews rowing alongside them, shaking their heads in silence, like, "Not cool, buddy. Not cool." So you can see, every coastline had its own spin. But the theme was the same: drowned sailors don't stay gone. And because sailors believed it, they built little rituals into their daily life to keep the spirits calm. One common practice was pouring out a drink before bed. A splash of rum or beer over the side for the dead. Here you go, mates, this one's for you. Basically, a ghost happy hour. Another was whistling bands. Sailors believed whistling on deck called the wind. Do it at the wrong time, and you weren't just whistling, you were summoning the drowned to come stir up a storm. So if you were the guy humming and whistling on night duty, expect some angry glares. Some crews left a bit of bread on the deck at night. The idea was simple: if a hungry wraith came by, he could snack on the bread instead of dragging anyone overboard. Which makes sense, really. If I were a ghost and someone offered me carbs, I'd chill out too. And then there was the big one: never speak the names of the dead at sea. Mentioning a drowned sailor was thought to call his spirit back. If you needed to talk about him, you used a nickname, or you just gestured. Sailors were superstitious, but also practical. They figured, why risk tempting fate? Now, were these rituals just habits? Maybe. But on the Baltic, with its storms, fog, and freezing water, they gave sailors a sense of control. You can't fight the weather, but you can toss a crust of bread to the waves and hope it helps. Of course, skeptics will roll their eyes. They'll say, the wraiths were just tricks of light on fog. The footsteps were the ship creaking. The voices were the wind in the rigging. And sure, all that makes sense. But the thing is, the stories didn't need logic. They carried weight because every sailor knew someone who drowned. When the sea takes so much, you start to believe it has a memory. One tale from Sweden tells of a captain who mocked the wraith stories. He whistled on deck, ignored the rituals, laughed at the bread offerings. Then one night his crew claimed they saw him talking to a dripping figure at the bow. The next morning, the captain was gone. No splash heard. No trace found. Just vanished. The crew swore the wraith had claimed him. Another story from Latvia tells of a fishing boat overloaded with its catch. The captain bragged about his profits, ignoring his men's warnings. That night, the crew saw ghostly rowers alongside their boat. By morning, their nets were ripped to shreds, their catch gone. Lesson learned: don't be greedy, especially if the afterlife has a union. So, whether you were in Finland, Estonia, Sweden, or Latvia, the rules were clear. Respect the sea, respect the dead, and maybe leave a drink or two for the wraiths. And even today, some fishermen quietly keep up the old habits. A little pour over the side. A crust tossed into the waves. Not because they believe, but because, well, why not? The sea's unpredictable. A bit of superstition never hurt. The Baltic's wraith legends remind us that people didn't just see the sea as water and waves. They saw it as alive. Full of memory, full of voices. A place where sailors lived, died, and sometimes, maybe, came back for one more night shift. And the next time you hear footsteps on a quiet deck or see mist curling strangely over the water, well, maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe it's a sailor who never really clocked out. Let's start with the Coast Guard logs. In the 1960s, Finnish Coast Guard officers reported strange moving lights on the Gulf of Bothnia. Bright, shifting orbs that danced just above the water. They weren't planes. They weren't ships. And radar? Nothing. The logs describe one incident where a patrol boat chased the lights for over an hour, only to watch them blink out like someone flipped a cosmic light switch. Jump a few years forward. An Estonian lighthouse keeper in the 1970s wrote about a glowing column rising out of the sea at night. He thought it was a flare. Standard, right? But no boats ever sent distress calls, and no wrecks were found. His log entry ended with, either the sea wanted my attention, or someone forgot to turn off their ghost spotlight. Gotta love Baltic humor. And then there's a Swedish Coast Guard note from the 1980s. Crew reported a phantom ship sailing silently across their bow. Lights on, full size, everything clear as day. They sounded the horn, no answer. They turned to follow, poof. Nothing. Radar said the sea was empty. That log ends with, recommend crew reduce coffee intake. Sure, blame caffeine. But it's not just guards and keepers. Captains, professional, no-nonsense people, have their own stories. One Latvian captain in the 1990s wrote that his crew saw a cargo ship dead ahead. Big lit, slow moving. They prepared to adjust course. Then, without warning, the ship just vanished. No fog, no storm, no tricks of the eye. 1 second it was there, the next, open sea. The captain said he checked radar 3 times. Nothing. His testimony basically screams, look, I don't believe in ghosts, but someone explain this, please. Another Finnish captain in 2007 logged a night where his crew saw 2 ships collide in the distance. Lights tangled, sparks, a mess. They called it in. Rescue units rushed over and found 0 wrecks, 0 oil, 0 debris. Everyone scratched their heads. Maybe it was a mirage? Maybe it was a prank? Or maybe the sea was running a hologram show. Even modern coast guards occasionally sneak spooky lines into their reports. In 2012, an Estonian patrol logged unidentified red lights circling above the sea surface, moving against the wind. They filed it as unresolved anomaly. Bureaucratic speak for, we have no idea what we just saw, but let's not put ghosts in the official paperwork. Now, before we all decide the Baltic is a full-on paranormal theme park, let's pause. Because science has a few answers. Maybe not as fun as ghost ships, but worth hearing. One explanation, radar anomalies. Radar is amazing, but it's not perfect. Temperature layers in the atmosphere can bend signals, making objects appear where they aren't, or hiding ones that are there. So when a captain swears a ship was right in front of him but radar said, nah, it could be this little trick. Radar ghosts, basically. Then there's St. Elmo's fire. No, not the 80s movie, the real phenomenon. It's a blue or violet glow that happens when the air is charged with electricity, like before a storm. It clings to masts, antennas, even people's hair. Sailors have freaked out over it for centuries and honestly, fair. Imagine your ship suddenly sprouting neon blue flames in the middle of the night. I'd scream too. And of course, the legendary Fata Morgana. This is a mirage on steroids. Layers of warm and cold air bend light over the horizon, making distant ships look like they're floating in the sky, or stacking up like a ghost fleet. Sometimes they even appear upside down. Creepy? Totally. Natural? Yup. The name comes from Morgan Le Fay, the sorceress of Arthurian legend, which tells you even scientists thought it felt magical. So yeah, some of these phantom ship sightings might be radar quirks, electric glows, or mirages. Science can explain a lot. But here's the thing. Not all of it. Even with radar errors, even with mirages, some cases don't line up neatly. Like that 1990s Latvian captain, his crew saw a solid ship right in front of them that radar didn't pick up. No collision, no wreck, no mirage effects. Just gone. Or the Estonian ghost flare that rose from the sea but left no trace. Science offers tools, but the sea doesn't always play fair. Which is why Coast Guard logs are such a goldmine. They're not written by ghost hunters. They're written by professionals who just wanted a boring night shift. When they file unexplained light or vanishing vessel, you pay attention. And here's the fun part. Even with satellites, GPS, and all our fancy gadgets, strange reports still come in. Not every month, sure, but enough to keep the legend flame alive. A captain might laugh about it at the bar later, but in the moment? When you're staring at a phantom ship that shouldn't exist. Yeah, your heart races. You start remembering all those old wraith stories your grandparents told. The sea has always blurred the line between real and unreal. Fog, waves, light, it all mixes into illusions that feel alive. Add in a dash of superstition, and you've got a recipe for Coast Guard logs that sound like ghost stories. Let's peek into that bag of tricks. Because while some stories might be pure ghost business, others have pretty neat science behind them. And don't worry, I'll keep the science chill. No long equations, just the fun stuff. First up, the superstar of sea illusions, the Fata Morgana. This thing is basically the sea's version of Photoshop. It happens when layers of warm and cold air stack in just the right way. Light bends, images stretch, and suddenly ships that are way over the horizon look like they're floating in the sky. Picture this, you're a sailor in the 1600s. No Netflix, no radar, just eyes and a lot of faith. You look out and see what seems like a ghost fleet hovering in the clouds. Maybe upside down. Maybe stretched tall like haunted towers. Would you calmly say, "Ah yes, a temperature inversion bending the rays of light"? Nope. You'd freak out, tell your crew it's a warning from the sea gods, and write in your logbook that you saw phantom armadas. The name itself tells you how spooky it felt. Fata Morgana comes from Morgan Le Fay, a sorceress in Arthurian legend. Sailors really thought this was sorcery. And honestly, when you see a ship floating upside down in the sky, sorcery sounds more believable than air density layers. Okay, now let's talk glow. Ever seen videos of beaches where the waves sparkle neon blue when they crash? That's bioluminescent algae, tiny organisms that light up when disturbed. It looks magical, like the ocean swallowed a rave. In the Baltic, algae blooms can create glowing wakes behind ships or even whole patches of shimmering water. To sailors at night, that glow might look like a ghost ship gliding under the waves, its outline shimmering just beneath the surface. Imagine rowing out and seeing the water under your boat flicker to life with every stroke, spooky and beautiful at the same time. And here's a fun twist, sometimes the glow sticks to fish or driftwood. So you might see a glowing figure moving through the sea. Fishermen in old tales swore they saw glowing sailors walking on the waves. Reality check, probably just a school of fish lighting up like glow sticks on parade. Still, if I saw a neon green blur moving alongside my boat at 2 a.m., I wouldn't be laughing. I'd be rowing faster. Ghosts don't always show up as visions. Sometimes they arrive as sounds. And the sea at night? Oh, it's a master of creepy audio effects. Over flat water, sound can travel crazy far. A ship's engine miles away might sound like it's right next to you. A distant conversation can drift over the waves like a whisper at your ear. And in the quiet of the night, every creak of your own ship suddenly sounds 10 times louder. Sailors have sworn they heard phantom engines, phantom cannons, even phantom cries. But science says, calm down, it's just sound playing tricks. The water's flat, the air's stable, and the sea basically becomes an echo chamber. It's like when you hear your neighbor's TV through the wall and think they're in your living room. Same vibe. Still, imagine being in World War II on a dark convoy and suddenly hearing an engine roaring nearby, but seeing nothing. Are you going to think, ah yes, sound refraction? Or are you going to think, oh no, phantom U-boat? Exactly. Last but not least, the classic fog illusion. You know those horror movies where shapes slowly emerge out of the mist? The Baltic has been doing that for centuries. Fog bends light in strange ways, especially near the water. Half-sunken masts, rocks, even waves can suddenly look like full ships sailing silently by. And if you've got an old wreck sticking just above the surface, fog can make it look alive again. Sailors swore they saw ghostly frigates drifting near the Gulf of Finland, only for later explorers to find an actual wreck in the same area. So yeah, sometimes the phantom ship is just a real shipwreck wearing a spooky fog costume. Which, to be fair, is still terrifying when you're rowing past it at dawn. So what do we do with all this? On one hand, we've got science tossing out explanations like, relax, it's just light bending, algae glowing, or sound traveling. On the other hand, we've got centuries of sailors, tough people, not easily fooled, swearing they saw things that shouldn't exist. Maybe the truth is both. Sometimes it's just tricks of nature, and sometimes, maybe it's something else. After all, even with science in our pocket, weird reports keep showing up. Coast guards still log unexplained lights. Divers still talk about shadows that move when no one's there. Let's start big. Literally. Bengtscar Lighthouse in Finland is the tallest lighthouse in all the Nordics, standing proud on a tiny island south of Turku. It was built in 1906 to keep ships from smashing into the rocks, but instead, it seems to have attracted stories of its own. Keepers here often wrote about strange knocking sounds in the night. Not just the wind rattling shutters, but sharp, deliberate knocks, as if someone was climbing the stairs, even when the keepers swore the place was empty. One journal entry bluntly says, "I went down to check. Nobody there. The sea is loud, but the knocks were louder." Some even claimed to see figures moving in the lantern room at night. Imagine being the only human on the island, trudging up the spiral staircase with your lantern, and catching a glimpse of someone already standing there, watching. That's enough to make you sprint back down and decide the fog can handle itself tonight. And Bengtscar has the history to back up the ghost vibes. During World War II, Soviet forces attacked the island. The lighthouse was shelled, set on fire, and nearly destroyed. Several soldiers died defending it. Locals believe some of those spirits never left. So when you hear knocks echoing through the tower, maybe it's just the walls settling. Or maybe it's a soldier still pacing his eternal watch. Now let's cross the sea to Estonia, to the island of Hiiumaa, where you'll find Kopu Lighthouse. This one's ancient, built in the early 1500s. That makes it one of the oldest lighthouses still standing anywhere in the world. With 5 centuries of storms, wrecks, and lonely nights, it has had plenty of time to collect ghost stories. Sailors call Kopu a death light, because so many ships wrecked nearby. The area is littered with old bones of vessels that never made it. Some blame bad charts, some blame storms, and some say the lighthouse itself was cursed, guiding ships not away from rocks, but straight onto them. Keepers here told stories of ghostly apparitions in the stairwell, pale faces peering through cracks, vanishing as soon as you blink. Others heard voices carried up from the sea. One legend says a ship crashed in fog just offshore, the crew screaming for help, but when rescuers rowed out, nothing. No wreck, no survivors, no sign a ship was ever there. If you're into rituals, Kopu has plenty. Keepers were known to leave bread and beer near the rocks as offerings to calm restless sailor spirits. Practical? Probably not. But hey, when you're stuck on an island in the middle of the Baltic with ghosts for company, you do what you have to do. And for a third stop, let's visit Udo, another lonely Finnish island. The lighthouse there dates back to the late 1700s and has its own brand of hauntings. Keepers wrote about phantom crashes, the sound of ships slamming into rocks during storms. They'd rush out, launch boats, search the coast, only to find nothing. It got so common that some keepers joked the ghosts were pranking them, like phantom neighbors knocking on the wall just to mess with you. But the joke doesn't erase the chill. Imagine hearing screams and splintering wood through the fog, rowing out into the black night, and finding only silence. History adds weight here too. Udo sits on one of the busiest, most dangerous sea routes into the Gulf of Finland. Hundreds of wrecks lie beneath those waters. Every wave probably touches the bones of sailors who never made it home. So when the lighthouse walls creak, or a shadow flickers by, maybe it's just the building settling. Or maybe it's one of those sailors, still circling the beacon. So why do lighthouses feel so haunted? Part of it is the job. Imagine months of isolation, just you, the waves, and the echo of your own footsteps. Your brain starts filling the silence with things that aren't there. Add in centuries of wrecks and storms, and suddenly every knock feels like a message from the past. And let's be real, these towers are perfect horror movie sets. Spiral staircases, drafty halls, windows that rattle in the wind. If ghosts had a real estate magazine, lighthouses would be on the cover. Of course, skeptics will say all this has simple causes. Knocks? That's the wind. Apparitions? Tricks of the light. Phantom crashes? Echoes of waves breaking on rocks. And sure, that explains some of it. But when you read the old keepers' journals, the sincerity jumps out. These weren't ghost hunters. These were tough people doing a lonely job, writing down exactly what they felt and heard. So maybe it's creaking walls. Or maybe it's centuries of sailors who still haven't moved on, pacing staircases, knocking on doors, making sure the light keeps burning. If the sea is scary, the sea in winter is downright brutal. In the Baltic, when the ice sets in, whole convoys have been trapped like bugs in amber. Sailors always feared storms, but the ice? That was a slower, crueler enemy. It didn't smash you to pieces in minutes. It just held you there, stuck, freezing, waiting. And out of those winters came some of the creepiest stories: ships frozen in place, crews vanishing, and later, ghostly convoys drifting where no living hand steered them. Back in the days of sail, merchants traveled in groups, convoys, for safety. But winter didn't care how many ships you had. If the ice came fast, the whole line could be locked in. Imagine 20 ships, sails furled, crews huddled on deck, the sea around them turning solid. Suddenly, the Baltic wasn't water anymore. It was a frozen wasteland. Logs from the 17th and 18th centuries described these scenes. Sailors walking from ship to ship over ice, building little camps between masts, even hunting seals for food because supplies ran low. Sometimes they survived. Sometimes, not so much. One convoy in the Gulf of Bothnia was reportedly trapped so deep in ice that rescue never came. Months later, another crew passing through found the ships empty. Supplies still on board, ropes still tied, but no men. It was like the crews had simply walked off into the white nothingness and vanished. No footprints, no graves, no answers. Now here's where it gets strange. Stories spread of those same ships reappearing years later, drifting silently through the mist. Sailors swore they recognized the vessels, same hulls, same figureheads, but no crew. Just empty decks, sails in tatters, steering wheels creaking as if moved by invisible hands. One Swedish fisherman in the 1800s told his family he saw an entire line of ships sailing in formation across the horizon. But when his sons rowed out to check, the horizon was empty. No sails, no masts, nothing. Was it a mirage? Maybe. But to him, it was the convoy of the lost, still making its journey long after the men were gone. Even in the 20th century, whispers continued. A Finnish icebreaker crew in the 1930s reported spotting an abandoned schooner drifting between ice floes. They boarded it and found no one. The galley still had dishes, the bunks still had blankets, but the ship was deserted. Some of the men swore it was one of the ice ghosts from old tales. The captain, being practical, logged it as an unmanned vessel, but even he admitted it looked too well preserved for its age. Part of what makes these stories so spooky is how ice preserves things. Unlike storms that tear ships apart, ice can hold them almost perfectly, like a freezer. Wooden hulls stay intact, ropes stay stiff, even food can last shockingly long. When explorers or fishermen stumble across one, it's like opening a time capsule. One diver once joked that wreck hunting in the Baltic feels less like archaeology and more like shopping in a ghostly secondhand store. The cold water and lack of shipworms mean you find ships frozen in time, lanterns still hanging, carvings still sharp. So when sailors say they saw ghost convoys, maybe they really did see derelicts set free after years of being locked in ice. But the way they tell it, silent fleets gliding through fog, no sound but creaking wood, that feels like something more. Let's pause for some real-world danger. Navigating ice is no joke. Even modern steel ships get crushed by shifting flows. Back in the wooden days? It was terrifying. Ice didn't just trap you. It pressed against the hull, squeezing until planks splintered. You could hear it, that slow groan of wood under pressure, like the ship itself was crying out. Crews sometimes abandoned ship before the crushing finished, walking miles over ice to reach land. Some made it. Many didn't. And here's the cruel trick. Sometimes the ice let go. A storm shifted, a channel opened, and the abandoned ship sailed free, alone, unmanned, drifting like a ghost. Imagine spotting 1 year later, sails torn but still standing, and realizing it was once your neighbor in the convoy. There's a phrase sailors used, ships frozen in time. It wasn't just poetic. They meant it literally. In the 19th century, Baltic hunters claimed they found a 3-masted bark locked in an ice field, the crew frozen at their posts. One man on deck still had a pipe in his hand. Another leaned against the wheel. When the thaw came, the ice broke and the ship drifted off, still carrying its silent watch. Whether that story's true or exaggerated, it stuck in memory. People started saying you could meet those same frozen crews on winter nights, their pale faces staring out of fog, their ships groaning as they tried to keep sailing forever. So, are the lost convoys really out there, still sailing in ghostly formation? Or are these just stories sailors told to give meaning to the brutal power of ice? Probably a mix of both. On one hand, we know ice can trap ships, preserve them, and later release them. Derelicts do drift, sometimes for years. On the other hand, whole convoys gliding silently across the horizon. That's where mystery creeps in. And honestly, mystery is the point. These tales remind us that the sea, and especially the frozen sea, doesn't play by our rules. It freezes, holds, erases, and sometimes gives back just enough to make us wonder. Okay, picture this. You're on a boat, gear strapped tight, tank hissing like a snake, mask fogging up because you breathed too heavy before the dive. The sea looks calm, but you know what waits under there, a wreck. Old wood, dark holes, maybe some history clinging to the walls. And you're about to drop in. The first thing you feel when you descend is silence. Not total silence. Your bubbles sound like a soda can being shaken next to your ear, but everything else? Muffled. The further you go down, the more the world above disappears. Light fades, pressure builds, and suddenly you realize you're in someone else's world. Not yours. The ocean's. And the ocean has a habit of whispering. A lot of divers say the same thing. Once you get near a wreck, the water feels different. Heavier. Thicker. Some swear they hear voices. Not words, exactly, more like murmurs. One diver told me it was like hearing a crowded bar from far away. Chatter, laughter, and then silence when you turn your head. Another swore he heard knocking, like someone trapped inside the hull. T-ject, of course. Nothing there but crabs. Unless the crabs were doing construction work? Unlikely, but who knows? The strangest part? These voices often come when you're alone. You look around, your buddy's off to the left, and still you hear something on the right. The water plays tricks, carrying sound in weird ways. But when it's pitch dark, 30 meters down, your brain doesn't say, oh, sound waves refracted. It says, ghosts. Another thing divers talk about, sudden cold spots. One moment the water's fine, the next it's like you swam into a refrigerator. Some say that's just thermoclines, layers of different temperature water. Others say it feels too focused, like someone passing right through you. And then there are the currents. Sometimes gentle, sometimes pushing. Divers describe invisible hands nudging them away from certain parts of wrecks. One Finnish diver said every time he tried to enter a specific cargo hold, he felt resistance, like swimming into an invisible wall. He backed off. Later, another diver went in the same hold and had his light fail instantly. Coincidence? Maybe. But after enough of those, you start to think the wreck has moods. Now, if you really want to creep yourself out, imagine feeling something brush your arm 25 meters down. You spin, but no one's there. Your buddy's a few meters away, and there's no fish big enough nearby. Divers call these phantom touches. Could be stray seaweed. Could also be your nerves firing weird because of the pressure. But when you're already on edge, it feels like someone down there is reaching out. One wreck diver in Estonia swore he felt a hand grab his fin. He kicked hard, broke free, and shot up faster than he should have. Dangerous, but in the moment? He said he was sure something tried to pull him deeper. Science says imagination. His face, when he told the story, said otherwise. Okay, let's pause the ghost talk for a second. There are scientific reasons for all this. Divers deal with weird mental effects. Nitrogen narcosis. Go deep enough, and nitrogen in your blood makes you feel drunk. That means giggling at nothing, hearing voices, or panicking at shadows. It's called rapture of the deep, which sounds poetic but basically means your brain's a little tipsy. Sensory deprivation. It's dark, it's quiet, it's repetitive. Your brain starts filling in the blanks. You hear whispers because your mind doesn't like the silence. You feel touches because your nerves are on high alert. Sound distortion. Water carries sound differently than air. Knocks, clicks, even your own regulator can sound like voices. Your brain, primed for fear, translates it into whispers. So yeah, ghosts aren't required to explain any of it. But here's the kicker, even knowing all that doesn't make it less creepy. Let me share a few actual lines from divers I've read or talked to. It felt like the wreck was watching me. Like it knew I was there. I heard a voice call my name. Clear as day. My buddy didn't hear a thing. The current inside the wreck pushed me out 3 times. I gave up. Maybe it didn't want me in there. My light flickered every time I got close to the captain's cabin. When I backed off, it stayed steady. Now, none of these folks were wild storytellers. Most were tough, no-nonsense types. And they all admitted, yeah, it could be the brain under stress. But all of them added, still felt real down there. Here's the funny thing. With all the fear, the whispers, the phantom hands, divers still go back. Again and again. Because wrecks pull you in. There's history down there. Adventure. Sometimes treasure. But also, maybe, a brush with the unknown. One diver said, it's like walking into an abandoned house at night. You're scared, but you want to see what's inside. Except in this case, the house is underwater, dark, and possibly full of very confused fish. So, what's the truth? Are the whispers below just science messing with our heads? Or are wrecks actually haunted by the crews that went down with them? Honestly, both sides have good points. Science explains the mechanics. But the experience, the feeling, is real. And feelings are what fuel legends. A diver hears a whisper, feels a hand, and when he tells that story later on shore, it's not just about neurons firing. It's about the mystery of the deep. And maybe that's the best way to see it. Ghosts or no ghosts, the sea knows how to keep secrets. It lets you peek just enough to wonder, then sends you back up with your heart racing. Alright, let's shift gears. We've been swimming through spooky dives and phantom ships for a while, but now it's time to step back and ask, how did these stories actually grow? Ghost ships don't just float out of nowhere. WWII, sometimes they literally do in the tales, but you get the point. A lot of the legends we've been covering didn't start as campfire ghost yarns. They started with real events, ships that sank, crews that disappeared, vessels that went missing in fog, and then slowly got dressed up by time, retelling, and a little sailor imagination. The Baltic has always been a tough sea. Narrow straits, shallow waters, ice in the winter, storms that come out of nowhere. It's basically a stress test for ships. Unsurprisingly, ships vanished. Crews didn't come back. Sometimes wreckage washed up, sometimes not. And every time that happened, people asked questions. Why didn't they return? Where did they go? Did they run into pirates? Trucks? Or something else? When you don't have GPS, satellites, or instant communication, the unknown is huge. And humans? We hate not knowing. So we fill in the blanks. That's where folklore slides in like an opportunistic roommate. Take any ship that just, poof, vanished. No survivors, no logs, just gone. In the Baltic, these cases were common, especially during stormy seasons or wartime. Over time, the lack of answers got swapped with stories. A missing cargo ship? Maybe it was swallowed by a ghostly whirlpool. A warship never heard from again? Perhaps it sails still, appearing to unlucky fishermen on foggy nights. Folklore often starts this way. History gives the setup, but imagination writes the ending. Here's something people sometimes forget. Ghost ship tales weren't just for spooking folks. They had a job. These stories worked kind of like floating caution signs. If you tell young sailors about the glowing white ship of the Gulf of Finland that appears before a storm, you're not just being dramatic. You're warning them, storms kill. Respect the weather. If you say drowned sailors might return as wraiths if you disrespect the sea, you're also teaching, don't mess around, keep discipline. So yeah, ghost stories on the Baltic weren't just entertainment. They were survival tools dressed up in spooky clothing. Some ghost ship stories worked like morality plays. Imagine a tale of a greedy captain who ignored warnings, overloaded his ship, and then, boom, wrecked. Later, sailors swear they see his cursed vessel drifting in the fog, still heavy with phantom cargo. What's the message? Don't be greedy. Respect the limits. Or take stories of crews who mutinied and then supposedly haunt the sea forever. That's basically a floating HR manual. Don't rebel, don't break the chain of command, or else. Ghost stories kept discipline where maybe rules alone couldn't. Of course, not all stories were grim warnings. Sometimes, sailors just needed to pass the time. Long voyages meant long nights, and you can only play dice or carve little wooden fish so much. Telling ghost stories gave crews something to bond over. Picture it, a storm outside, ship creaking, lantern swinging. A sailor leans in and says, "You know, my uncle once saw a ship with no crew drifting past Bornholm." Suddenly everyone's listening. Some laugh nervously, some cross themselves, some keep glancing out into the dark. Boom, instant group activity. Folklore wasn't just survival or rules, it was also community glue. Fear's funny. It can split people apart, but it can also pull them close. Sailors on the Baltic faced real danger, storms, ice, war, you name it. Sharing ghost ship tales turned that fear into something they could manage together. Instead of sitting alone thinking, "I might die in this storm," you sit with your mates and say, "Hey, maybe that glow on the horizon is the white ship." It's scarier in one way, but lighter in another. You're in it together. So in a weird way, ghost ship legends were team-building exercises. Cheaper than corporate retreats, but with more salt water. Here's where it gets tricky. Over centuries, the line between history and legend blurs. A ship that truly sank gets remembered as one that haunts. A lighthouse keeper's honest report about strange lights gets retold as a phantom fleet. And once enough retellings pile up, who's to say what really happened? This mix is part of what makes Baltic lore so rich. Every story has a kernel of reality buried inside, like a grain of sand inside a pearl. Over time, layers of imagination build up around it, until what you have is less about the real ship and more about the story the sea wanted to tell. Even today, we don't need ghost ship tales to keep sailors cautious. We've got weather satellites, ice charts, radar, all the tech. But we still tell them because they serve a deeper purpose. They remind us the sea is dangerous, unpredictable, bigger than us. And they keep the romance alive. Because let's be honest, shipping manuals don't exactly fire up the imagination. Stories about spectral convoys or phantom sailors. Those stick. And every generation adds a little twist, a new angle, a fresh eerie detail. So when folklore meets history, you don't get dry facts or pure fantasy. You get something in between, history with atmosphere, stories with weight. Ghost ships in the Baltic aren't just tales to scare kids or keep sailors awake. They're warnings, lessons, entertainment, and memory all bundled into one. A vanished convoy turns into a haunting. A real wreck becomes a cursed landmark. And in telling those stories, sailors found a way to live with danger, laugh at fear, and maybe even feel a little less alone on a dark, endless sea. After everything we've covered, the phantom convoys, the white ship, the lady in black, the wrecks that whisper, you might be asking, what are ghost ships, really? Are they real? Are they just made-up sailor tales? Are they weird natural tricks of light and sound? Maybe, maybe not. But here's one way to see it. Ghost ships are memories. Not just human memories, but the sea's memories. Think about it. Every ship that ever sailed here left a trace. Some sank, some rotted, some got scrapped for parts. But the stories? The memories of the people who lived and died on those decks? They float. They don't go away. Maybe that's what people are seeing when they claim to spot a spectral hull in the mist. It's not a ship made of wood and iron. It's a memory that refuses to sink. The Baltic has seen centuries of travel. Vikings raided, traders bargained, empires fought, fishermen worked, and tourists today just sit on ferries eating overpriced hot dogs. Every wave has touched history. So is it really that wild to think the sea holds on to echoes? That now and then it plays them back for us? A phantom light, a strange sound, a fleeting shadow of a ship? If you've ever lost something important, a person, a home, a moment in your life, you know memories can be stubborn. They pop up when you least expect them. The sea, it seems, works the same way. Of course, not everything can be explained by nostalgia or watery sentiment. Some sightings are too sharp, too strange, too real to just shrug off as tricks. Radar blips of ships that don't exist. Divers swearing they felt a hand in the deep. Lighthouses where phantom knocks still echo. Are those just brain glitches, ice reflections, or stressed out nerves? Or are some ships still out there, drifting between worlds? Half in the past, half in the present. Half real, half story. That's the thing about ghost ships, they live in the in-between. Not fully gone, not fully here. Just like dreams. Just like memories. And hey, let's be honest. Some of these stories are creepy, but they're also kind of funny. The idea of a phantom convoy politely showing up on radar, confusing some poor World War II officer? That's like the supernatural version of a prank call. Or the thought of sailors hearing whispers and it turns out to be crabs knocking shells around. That's ghost story slapstick. But maybe that's part of the charm. Ghost ships don't just scare us, they entertain us. They remind us the sea has a sense of humor too, dry humor, but humor all the same. So as we close this journey, picture yourself back where we started, on a boat in the middle of a quiet Baltic night. The wind's soft, the waves small. A horizon so dark it looks like it could go on forever. Maybe you see nothing but calm water. Or maybe, just maybe, you catch a shape in the mist. A hull gliding silently, sails glowing faint in starlight. By the time you blink, it's gone. Was it real? Your imagination? A trick of the moonlight? You'll never know. And that's the point. The sea doesn't like giving straight answers. We tell ghost ship stories because they keep the mystery alive. They remind us the world isn't fully mapped, not even now. Sure, we have satellites and charts and Google Earth. But none of those tools can explain why someone swears they saw a phantom crew waving in the fog, or why a lighthouse keeper swore he heard knocking when no ship was near. Mystery is good for us. It keeps us curious. It keeps us humble. And in a world where so much is explained, the idea that some ships might still drift between worlds, that's comforting in a strange way. And now, it's time to drift yourself. If you're listening at night, maybe already tucked in, let the sea fade into your own dreams. Imagine yourself floating, rocking gently with the waves. The night sky overhead, the endless water below. Safe on the surface, but with just enough mystery underneath to make things interesting. If you see a phantom sail in your dream, don't panic. Just wave back. Ships of memory don't mean harm. They're reminders. They're companions. They're the past checking in, making sure we haven't forgotten. So what are ghost ships? Warnings? Memories? Hallucinations? Actual spirits still wandering the waves? Honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is the mystery. What matters is that for centuries, people have looked out into the Baltic night and wondered. And that wonder keeps us connected to history, to each other, to the sea itself. And maybe, just maybe, when the world goes quiet and the fog rolls in, there really is a phantom vessel out there, sailing softly where no living crew remains. So sleep easy. The ships will keep sailing, whether in your dreams or out on the horizon. The past never really sinks. It just drifts, somewhere between worlds,